We can see the rather neat action there of Greg Cameron in the Hamilton uniform on the right of the screen there. But Philip Clode in the University of Canterbury colours, the same club as Mary O'Connor, winner of the women's race earlier in the afternoon. And looking very relaxed. He's got a very high arm and knee action.
Phil Clode, who's running in the University colours. Then we have
Briggs of Australia in third place. Hardy and Maloney.
Just behind
fourth equal.
Hardy and Benson Brighton.
Coming down to the finish line with 3 complete laps of the journey left. And it's Clode leading from Cameron.
And they've opened up a little gap there, 4 or 5 metres. Nothing to concern at this stage, but it's certainly useful to have that sort of lead. Maloney certainly covering them there in third place. And for the first time we see in the picture Derek Frood in the Wellington Harrier colours, wearing number 2.
Derek Frood at the moment, who is in 8th position, just to the left of the far left of the picture. There you can see him running in the white and the blue, who has been seeded 2nd for this race. And he didn't play much of a prominent part in that first lap, but has started to thread his way through the field in much the same fashion as Maloney did. And there we can see a better shot of Derek Frood, who I'm sure will feature in this race because he showed very good form. You may recall a couple of weeks ago, the last time we saw him on television, the Sport A 10K run in that absolutely appalling condition at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland on the 25th of May when rain teamed for the entire duration of the race, and Derek Frood on that particular occasion at 3 o'clock in the morning won that race ahead of the likes of Fulbert Bayi and John Walker. So he's in good form, and I'll be surprised if he doesn't feature in the finish of this race.
Greg Cameron out in front there. He's got a couple of metres lead over Ken Maloney and Phil Clode.
And we'll signify when to go.
The Australian Gary Briggs there in 4th place. Tom Burney, very well-known local runner and at national level in the past. Mike Inwood of Australia. Peter Burney of Australia also there. They're running together alongside Burney. And it looks as if we've got a group of about 10 that have broken away quite clearly from the rest of the field.
And certainly Ken Maloney in 2nd place looks very comfortable at the moment.
He does. He looks very relaxed. He's approached this race obviously with a lot of confidence. He was quite happy to let them lead out and sort themselves out early, and has just moved into the sort of position that he wants. He ran this race in fairly similar style last year.
And gradually we see Derek Frood starting to play a more prominent part in this race, moving up to join the leaders in the race. There he is. He's now in 5th place, Derek Frood, behind the young Australian Michael Inwood. So it's Cameron, Maloney, Tom Burney in the New Brighton colours there, number 10. Alongside of him is Gary Briggs. Behind him we can see Derek Frood and the other Australian, Peter Burney, in that picture as well. The Australians, Burney, Briggs and Michael Inwood, the youngest of the 3 at just 19 years of age.
While the race is only in its early stages, certainly this unofficial test is going to be an interesting one. There's 2 New Zealanders that have been named for the New Zealand team, going 1-2. Cameron just glances across at Maloney there. Briggs in 3rd place. Tom Burney, not a part of the New Zealand team, but running well, as probably one could expect. Peter Burney, Derek Frood, and Michael Inwood, and the other University of Canterbury athlete there in 8th place would be Pat Metham.
The field midway through the 2nd lap of this 10,000 metre journey here at QE2 Park in Christchurch, the Skellerup Steeples, an event which has a long and very traditional history in the cross-country calendar in New Zealand. And if we look at some of the past winners, we see many of the most legendary names in New Zealand athletics appearing on the winners list over the last 20 years. The names, the likes of Jack Foster, who won it in 1973, Rod Dixon in 1972, Ewan Robertson in 1980, and the last 2 years, as we said, Ken Maloney has won it. And if we go back right to the early and mid-1960s, the likes of Peter Welsh, Brian Rose, Evan McGuire, Gavin Thorley, Eddie Gray, all very well-known runners who have come to Christchurch and won this event over the past 20 years.
This will certainly rate as the #2 event on the New Zealand cross-country calendar. The New Zealand Championships every year held in the second weekend of August, but this would certainly be the second most significant cross-country race on the running calendar.
No change at the top of the field, with about 3,500 metres of this 10,000 metre journey having been completed, with Greg Cameron from the Hamilton Harriers Club on the right, Ken Maloney from the Takapuna Club in Auckland in the middle of the picture, and running between them the bearded figure of Gary Briggs from Australia, and the man in fourth place, a former winner of this event back in 1981, Tom Burney. And now this is the second bunch, which are struggling a little to hang on to that leading bunch, comprising of Michael Inwood, who's at the top of the field there, #4, and the other Australian running in the white and the green, that's Peter Burney. And there you can see the two leading bunches at the moment, and I'm sure that's where the leading runners and the leading finishers in this race will come from. And Tom Burney looks as if he's having a little trouble hanging on to Briggs, Maloney and Cameron.
It's Briggs taking up the pace again. I suppose this is something of a head-on clash, because Briggs, the current Australian champion, Ken Maloney, the current New Zealand champion. In their last two outings, Ken Maloney has had the upper hand.
Well, it would be, I'm sure, enormously satisfying for Gary Briggs to win this event, because he was telling me that the continuation of his scholarship at the Institute really depends on the sort of results he can produce. They review these scholarships fairly regularly, and if you don't perform, they more or less show you the door. And I'm sure if he was able to return to Australia knowing that he'd won this race and beaten the current New Zealand cross-country champion, it would probably help his scholarship and extend his scholarship in Canberra. There he is, leading the field at the moment. A man who came to New Zealand last year, ran in the New Zealand cross-country championships and ran pretty poorly, finished I think in 11th place, but then returned home and promptly won the Australian title.
Yes, he's obviously an athlete whose form does tend to fluctuate. He didn't run well at the World Cross Country Championships, as you indicated earlier, Brendan, but apparently the previous year he did run well and was placed, I think, the third Australian home in that event. Certainly he's on form today.
So the fact that this race has been able to bring together the two reigning Trans-Tasman cross-country championships just a couple of weeks before the Commonwealth Games, with so many leading runners missing, is perhaps an indication of the depth of the sport in this country, which tends to perhaps belie the rather poor finishes we've had at the World Cross Country Championships in recent years. That one gets the feeling, Kevin, that our teams at the World Cross Country Championships in recent years haven't really done themselves full service, have they? No,
I think that's certainly true, Brendan. Certainly the men's team's performance this year was disappointing in Switzerland, finishing 13th. The Australians beat us fairly decisively there. I think that's probably the best indication of what our form is, and the Australians finished 9th. We were back in 13th place.
Well, of course, in a couple of years, New Zealanders will have a chance to perhaps show their true worth when the World Cross-Country Championships are held in New Zealand. And I have a feeling that one of the problems we have is the fact that every year we send a team to the World Cross-Country Championships after our summer, and of course they go into a cross-country race with very little cross-country experience or racing behind them. But of course, when they're held here, we'll have the advantage over the Northern Hemisphere runners, and maybe we'll see the New Zealand team really challenge for that world title. And certainly the World Cross-Country Championships would be probably one of the most difficult and hardest races to win in athletics these days. And the New Zealand team, well, as I said, just can't help but feel they haven't really done themselves justice with their results in recent years.
No, our women have certainly been the bonus in that regard. They've performed exceptionally well, and their second place this year was a fine run. But certainly our men, I think they've certainly come home, and there's certainly been some fairly serious thought given to our future participation and ways of making us perform somewhat better.
Certainly a very talented team that we sent to Switzerland this year, including the man that we can see there in the middle of the picture, Ken Maloney, who finished 146th, Peter Renner, John Bowden, Jeff Shaw, Kerry Roger, Dave Burridge, Rex Wilson, all very experienced and very talented runners, but just don't seem to be able to put it together as a team. It's happened again this year.
You see there in the picture at the moment, the second bunch away from the top four there, places 5 to 8, and Wellingtonian Derek Frood there, number 2.
who in fact is a former captain of the New Zealand World Cross Country team, and didn't make the team this year.
And the other athlete there in the University of Canterbury colours, Pat Miffin, certainly running very well today. Pat returns from having toured overseas and made an attempt to run on the American circuit with not a great deal of success, but indicated on his return that in fact he was now starting to come into form, and that's a little bit indicative of his place there today, where he's sitting in about 7th place.
So it's still Gary Briggs who's done most of the donkey work in this race right from the start, and Ken Maloney, he knows he's the marked man in this field, and so he's quite happy to stay off that front pace and just sit in there behind Briggs.
Yes, the athletes have probably gone through the halfway mark, certainly just over 5,000 metres covered.
Maloney, who's a very competent 5 and 10,000 metre runner on the track, and I imagine if it comes down to the last 800 metres and these three are together, that there won't be much doubt about who will have the best and the superior speed over the last 800.
I can't help but feel that Ken Maloney there, he's just checking every now and then, just seeing where Greg Cameron lies. He's, I think, running very confidently.
Briggs, Australia. Maloney, New Zealand.
I see at the side of the track there Philip Clode, who obviously is pulled out of this race, having been leading at the end of the first lap.
The course here in Christchurch, as we mentioned before, is virtually dead flat, and in some ways it's not altogether dissimilar to the sort of courses that seem to be set for the World Cross Country Championships these days, that gone are the traditional and romantic images of manured farm paddocks and ankle-deep creeks of mud and thick native bush. They seem to be, these days, a trend in cross-country races to run them on flat, grassy surfaces, rather like this one here.
It's probably quite appropriate that a lot of the cross-country races are held on race courses or on parkland. And this, of course, they're running around what used to be the former New Brighton race course out here behind QE2 Park. Now, for the first time, we see on camera John Campbell. It's
well, that's a real surprise. There had been some talk before the race started that John Campbell would appear here, but it was dismissed when it was brought to our attention the fact that he was married yesterday. One really didn't believe that even a runner as hopelessly addicted to the sport as John Campbell would actually find time one day into his